What's up, FTFers? Today I want to talk about limiting yourself when it comes to practicing survival. Dang it, these airplanes and cars and roosters, it never stops. So what prompted this video idea? Well, I was actually just getting ready to do another installment of Suffering with Sawyer, and I was going over the packing list of what I was actually supposed to bring. So here's the kit that we're required to bring. As you can see, I mean, it is ultra lightweight. It is definitely under 10 pounds for sure. Now, disclaimer, before we get started, I want to be very clear about something. Here on this channel, we are always trying to tell you to be prepared. I think people get maybe confused, or they just don't fully understand why you would limit yourself with the amount of gear that you take out in the field. Well, the main reason is stress inoculation. We're just trying to create circumstances and situations where you actually have to think yourself through it. Now, I do think that there is a fine line between being stupid and being smart. In the past, I have gone out and I have done, only one item for survival challenges. And those kind of challenges, I mean, I'm just gonna be honest with you, they're extremely hard. There are a lot of people out there in the industry that are promoting this kind of thinking. You don't need all that other stuff. Rely on your skills and your experience. Well, the problem is that you're gonna have to do that anyway, because when you add stress into the mix, I mean, there's gonna be other things that you're gonna have to worry about too. Like, what if the resources aren't available? What if the situation dictates that you can't do those things? And I think there's a lot to be said about being tactically efficient in the field. I think also people forget about the amount of calories and hydration that is required to do this as well. Now, I can say that most of the time when I go train with Jason, he's always kind enough to the people that come, and he'll say, hey, choose your level of adventure. And it really amazes me because sometimes people, they're just not willing to let go of the gear. They look at the gear as like, hey, this is my lifeline, and I'm just not confident enough to do it without the gear. I think that maybe some of them fear that they might look bad in front of others, and so maybe there's an element of shame into it as well. Or just, in general, not wanting to be embarrassed. Now, there is the other side of that equation too, where there have been people on YouTube that are extreme wilderness people, and they go out into these extreme places with minimal gear, and unfortunately they paid for it with their life. I like training with a group of people where I know that they have my best interest in mind, and if for some reason I start to lose my mind a little bit, then they can help bring me back down to earth. And I know it's not because they're trying to make me look bad, it's because they actually genuinely care. It's also a good idea to have a safety plan in place. For me, there's also the aspect of building a community of people that you can practice with, and you can build those skills with, and you can come to depend on them. We often say in survival, there's no place for the John McClanes or the lone wolves. The truth is, we need people. But when it comes to the gear itself, I really think that there is a fine line, a balance between not having enough and then having too much. So what I want to do today is I want to go over the packing list for this next event, and I want to talk about it. Now, when it comes to me and practicing survival, I always want the things that are the hardest to recreate in nature. And let's just start right on top of the list. So the number one thing that he had on there was some kind of poncho or a small tarp. Now, this right here is my DD Hammocks 3 meter by 3 meter super light tarp. I love this thing. Y'all seen it in lots of videos. It's just an old faithful for me. I don't carry ponchos to these things very typically unless it's specified to bring a poncho, because I'm a big guy and I just don't fit underneath them. But for most people, if you're underneath 6 feet, then the poncho is probably a good option. But the thing that you want to realize with having some kind of cover element is that it's really hard to recreate this out there. Every time that I've ever built a survival shelter, excluding finding something like a cave or some kind of awesome natural shelter, it always takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And by the time I'm done with it, it doesn't even work properly to begin with. Now, I have taken my time in the past, and I have made things like lean-tos or roofs made out of bamboo by splitting it in half and then stacking it so that the water runs down the channels. I've even been able to get grasses together like they do some of the thatching out in England, for example, to work pretty good. But for the most part, I mean, survival always dictates that you're in a bad area and those resources aren't available, and what ends up happening, yeah, it doesn't work. Now, the next thing that he's got on the list is 25 feet of good old-fashioned paracord. Now, I can say in my younger days, not having cordage wasn't really that big of a deal, not like it is for me now. Honestly, if I sit down and I do reversed wrapping, it hurts my hands. And after I've got about a foot of it done, I'm just telling you, like, I'm done. My hands, from the carpal tunnels, from the arthritis, I mean, they're just killing me. Now, there are lots of other forms of cordage, right? Like if you find a bunch of kudzu, for example, kudzu vines are great for that. You can also do withies. But the thing is, I mean, having just a little bit of paracord in your pocket, it doesn't weigh anything, it doesn't cost a whole lot, and there are so many advantages to having some kind of paracord. So that's definitely something I'm glad that he had on the list this time. Next, we got a good old-fashioned stainless steel single wall canteen. Containers, man, the ability to source, filter, purify, store, and carry the water, I mean, that's a big deal out in nature. I have done videos in the past where I've showed you how to do it, but believe me, it's resource dependent, it takes a lot of time, and you also have the experience in the tooling to make it happen. Now, honestly, I would really rather have my Grail, but I've got to say, I'm super happy to have one of these for this challenge. It doesn't really matter what time of year, staying hydrated is really important. What's next on the list? A knife. Oh, and I've got my Gray Man here. I mean, why wouldn't I take the Gray Man with me? My oldest daughter, when she was in college, she actually did a paper on the most important tool that has changed history. And what the paper was on a knife. It's the thing that helped us as a species to evolve and stay alive the most over any other tool. And that's according to the, the experts. I was actually kind of shocked. I thought that it would have been something like, I don't know, soap. But I guess an argument could be made for just about anything. So we're just gonna roll with it. To a lot of people, a knife is not, really high on the list. For me, it is definitely way high up on the list. Having tools that allows you to make other tools is a pretty important thing for me. As a matter of fact, the majority of my kits my real kits that I actually use, they're pretty tool heavy. For me, it's just a force multiplier, and it gives me the opportunity to make a whole bunch of other stuff. And I think if you look at history and you see the people that came here to America and they lived out in the wilderness, I mean, that's what they carried, tools. Besides, making a knife out in the wild, I mean, it's quite difficult. I mean, sure, I've done a lot of flint knapping, but I've even like skinned deer with it and cut cordage and even cut down trees. But I gotta tell you, I don't enjoy doing it. So having a good quality tool like this knife, the Gray Man, yeah, I'm super stoked to have that one. And speaking of tools, having some way to light your fire. He actually gave us a choice on whether we should bring a lighter or a ferro rod. So get in the comment section and let me know, which one would you take? I have done lots of friction fires in the past in demonstration, but I always had one of these two things in my pocket when I was doing it. Making a friction fire set, a bow drill, a hand drill, a plow point, a fire saw, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you don't have one of these, it becomes exponentially even harder than that. I want to talk about burning some calories and becoming dehydrated. Friction fire will definitely do that to you. Maybe I'll just throw both of them in there, and whatever is harder at the time, that's what I'll use. Holy wind. All right, the next thing he's got on the list is just having a small pack. Well, I really don't have a pack that is smaller than this. This is my 16-liter pack. It carries a whole lot more than what I have on this table here. And when I put it on to come out here to film, I mean, it was like I wasn't wearing anything at all. Historically speaking, having something like this where you can carry the stuff that you already have and then to be able to add stuff into it, as you source it there, having possum mentality, I mean, that's an awesome piece of kit to have. It's just a huge force multiplier, and it just makes sense. So yeah, grateful to have a pack. Now, I don't think he put this in order, I don't think there's any specific order to what he did here, but the next thing on the list is actually a bandana. Now, I gotta say, just like, the stainless steel single wall container, I'd rather have a Grail, When it comes to having a piece of cotton, I'd much rather have a shemagh, but the ability to have something like this, oh yeah, I'm grateful to have it. The one that I'm carrying today is the tracking bandana by Wazoo Gear. I really like this thing. I have it on me at all times anyway, and so that's just the one that I threw into the pack. There's lots of uses for them. I don't even have to go over them, right? 100 uses for a piece of cotton. Let's just say from first aid to fire, you got it covered. All right, so the last thing that was on the list was just one large heavy-duty trash bag. I have a love-hate relationship with these things too. Anytime that we do a class where, you know, we're going with minimal gear, we always have one of these with us, and that's so that you can collect things with it. It's also so that you can put duff inside of it, and then you have yourself a nice sleeping mat. You know, get yourself off of the wet ground. And there's lots of other uses for it too, like say collecting rainwater. Sometimes it's nice to be able to cover up, you know, your fire supplies if it's pouring rain. I mean, there's lots and lots of uses for, you know, a good old 6mm trash bag, but it doesn't mean it doesn't come with its nuances too. Every time I have ever tried to sleep on one of these things, they're loud, they make a lot of noise, and you slide right off. So there's really an art to adjusting how much duff goes into one of these where it's actually practical, where you don't slide off of it. But I can definitely see the value in having one of these, and believe me, making one of these in nature, yeah, you're not doing that. So that's it. I went through the entire list of what Jason is allowing us to bring to this challenge. And I gotta say, I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, this is actually a pretty good kit. What I wanna know is what y'all think about that though. I mean, there's only 8 items in this kit, but every single thing on this table, I look at it like it's a force multiplier. It gives me a tactical advantage. It's just something else that I don't have to make or recreate. Now, depending on where you are, this may or may not be enough, because I mean, we haven't talked about extremes. I mean, what if you're way up north and it's super cold? Or what if you're, you know, out in the west and it's super hot? So there's a lot of things, you know, that could be talked about as far as that goes. But as far as a base kit goes, anytime I get something like this in my hands for a challenge, I'm happy. Because imagine how far behind I would be if I didn't have this stuff. I think what Jason's gonna be focusing on this time is probably fundamentals. Because like I said, every time that I've ever done something with him, there's always people that chose not to limit themselves. And I think a lot of times too, we as survival instructors, we tend to take things for granted. But we also realize too that we've got to push students sometimes, because people tend to not push themselves unless they are pushed. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. If you were going to gear up to go to a survival challenge, what is missing out of this kit that you would really wish that you could bring? I think the #1 thing for people is probably going to be food, because people just don't like starving in general unless they're on some kind of specialized diet, and even then they don't enjoy it. Somebody else is probably going to say, well, what about a first aid kit? Still, somebody else is going to jump in and say, where's your defense? Don't you live in America? And hey, there's a whole lot more things that I could add to the list, but one thing that people do realize when they go out and they train with us is they didn't need as much as they thought they did in the beginning. Now, a lot of that is situationally dependent. Like if you were doing some specialized training and let's say it was navigation, I mean, you're gonna need your compass, you're gonna need some map tools, maybe a GPS, pencils to write on, things to protect the maps, right? But that's specialized training. I don't know exactly what Jason's gonna do for this one, but I've got a pretty good idea based on what the packing list is. So something else that I want to know is when you do go out there and you train, how do you limit yourself? How do you create stress? Where is the stress inoculation in your training? There's lots of ways to do it. I mean, you can limit yourself with stuff. You can limit yourself with time. Weather can also play a factor in it. You can even add in team dynamics to make it more challenging. But one thing I definitely want to do is I want to take advantage of you, the viewer, the audience that's actually watching this. I want to know, of the people that are watching, how do you train? Do you ever limit yourself? I mean, do you create stress inoculation? And, you know, if you were going to go do something like this, would you feel comfortable with only having 8 items, including your pack? Do you even feel like that's smart to begin with? Because I think a big part of it is, you know, your level of experience, your level of training, your skill sets, all of that combined. And I think that's really important because you definitely need to do these things, and whatever you do carry, it should be inversely proportionate to your skill set. But I also think that there is a time for you to push yourself too. And if you can't push yourself, then you can go do some training with people like me and Jason where somebody else will push you. And honestly, when you're doing it at the time, it sucks. But the thing is, at the end of it, you have gained just so much confidence. Not to mention the friends that you made along the way that suffered with you. So I wanted to keep this one short. So if you're hunting smack digging the video, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And until next time, y'all, keep fueling those fires.